Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the 18th edition of the Online Education Leadership Forum panel discussion series focused on transforming education for human flourishing. Thank you so much for investing your time with us on a weekday. My name is Aryan Salman, and I'm the moderator for this panel discussion. Today, we have a stellar panel that will discuss the question: how can we mainstream and advance global citizenship education? We'll be discussing the significance and role of Target 4.7 in transforming individuals and our societies. In addition to looking at addressing the challenges, strategies, and approaches to mainstream and advance global citizenship education. Also, we'll be sharing relevant and related resources with you after the live broadcast. So please check out the event page on our website, globalcitizenshipfoundation.org, after 72 hours, or follow us on our social media profiles to receive the latest updates on the same. The recordings of the previous 17 panel discussions and the live broadcast of this panel discussion are available both on our website and on our social media channels, including YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So join us on our social media pages and be part of our current and future initiatives. I hope you will continue to support us by actively sharing your ideas, suggestions, and feedback, and help us improve the way we serve you and boost our efforts in advancing the discourse on transforming education for human flourishing. As you know, we continue to live in increasingly challenging and uncertain times with enormous changes and disruptions to our lives and our professions. It is a moment for us to assume active global citizenship and support those in need. Having said that, I would also like to take this moment to mark a minute of silence for those who have lost their lives to the pandemic, the grieving individuals and families, and in solidarity with educators facing grave challenges in conflict zones. Thank you. The Online Educational Leadership Forum was started with the objective to provide a platform for educational leaders to shape, empower, influence, and advance the discourse on, and be a springboard aiding action towards transforming education for human flourishing. Target 4.7, that is education for global citizenship and sustainable development, is considered not just the heart and soul of Sustainable Development Goal 4, but is a linchpin to the realization of all other sustainable development goals. Target 4.7 is the directional compass that gives purpose and direction to quality education. The Global Citizenship Foundation defines global citizenship education as a transformative lifelong pursuit that involves both curricular learning and practical experience to shape a mindset to care for humanity and the planet, and to equip individuals with global competencies to undertake responsible actions aimed at forging more just, peaceful, secure, sustainable, and tolerant societies. One of the intentions of promoting global citizenship education is to help realize the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Apart from that, as many scholars have suggested, the importance of advocating global citizenship education for individual growth and development. Global citizenship education helps in ensuring holistic teaching and learning by supporting learners to gain a wider and a deeper understanding of local and global contexts, equipping them with necessary knowledge and skills to reach their full potential in a rapidly changing and interdependent world, developing their passions and commitment to address local and global challenges and issues. For global citizenship education to be effective, it needs to be holistic and implemented in different educational settings and levels, right from early childhood education to adult education. This is the need, and we need to encourage diverse and different approaches to teaching global citizenship education, both in formal and non formal settings. Against this background, we initiate the discussion on ways to mainstream and advance global citizenship education. So here's the format to give you an idea of what to expect. First, we'll take a few minutes to introduce our awesome panelists from Canada and the United States. Then we'll kick off the conversation by opening the floor to the panelists. In the second half of our time today, we'll open the floor to give you an opportunity to directly ask specific questions to the panelists by either posting your questions in the chat platforms or by or by raising your hand, and we'll give you the mic to ask the questions directly. Also, please feel free to share your thoughts and ideas in the chat section anytime during the discussion and create a learning and engaging experience for all. The idea is to navigate the present and upcoming opportunities, issues, and challenges together to be able to transform education for human flourishing. Sounds good? Great. Let's get started with the panel introductions. It is my delightful pleasure to welcome Dr. Eric Baker. Dr. Baker is an associate professor in the Honors College and in the Cato College of Education at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, United States. During the 1920 academic year, Eric served as University of North Carolina's resident director of international programs at Kingston University in London, UK. He is the founder of TEDx Craver Road Countdown program, which raises awareness about ways to take action on climate change in relation to sustainable development goals. I take great pleasure in welcoming Dr. Linyon Go Brennan. She is the Associate Professor of International and Global Education at University of Prince Edward Island, Canada. Her research and teaching focuses on global leadership, internationalization in higher education, global citizenship education, international and comparative education, teacher education, curriculum and diversity, equity and inclusion in education policy, leadership, and praxis. It is my profound pleasure to welcome Dr. Paul Sherman. Dr. Sherman is currently the program head of community social services at the University of Gulf Humber, Canada. Dr. Sherman is also the director of the SOCA Education Research Center on Global Citizenship at the university. He's also the adjunct professor at the university. Prior to joining the University of Gulf Humber, Dr. Sherman has worked as a clinician and senior administrator in diverse community mental health settings for over 30 years. So now I open the floor to the panelists by requesting Dr. Baker to make his initial remarks.
Thank you so much, Aryan, for the warm introduction and for this invitation from the Global Citizenship Foundation to be able to be a panel member and speak to a area, global citizenship education, which I have tremendous passion for. I also want to just extend my greetings to all the audience members who are joining, and also what a delight it is to be among such great panel members as well. So I have 3 points I'd like to open with, if I may. First, I'd like to just say the world is changing, and I do appreciate the moment of silence we had at the beginning out of respect for those who lost lives in the pandemic, also in conflict zones. We're reminded every day how the world is changing, and for our students to be global citizens as a teacher educator, I believe that it starts with teachers to be globally prepared. So advancing global citizenship and mainstreaming global citizenship education is guided by teachers in schools, and particularly for me, by our future teachers. Second, the second point I'd like to make is that the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals provide not just an agenda for sustainable development for the future and for the 2030 goal year, but it also provides a roadmap for schools, for teachers, for those who are in the business of education to be able to integrate the SDGs into the curriculum. I think this is very important. And I'm not sure who made the decision at the United Nations to design the SDGs the way they were, but I think it's quite brilliant because they are symbolic, they're iconic, and they're colorful. And it immediately appeals to children. And for me, for the students I have, teacher candidates, it's quite appealing because of the iconic nature of the SDGs, the symbolic, how they are symbolic, and also how they are colorful. I have pre-pandemic, I had the opportunity in my research as an associate professor to spend time in London at the university or at Kingston University in London. And during that time, I also was able to travel to several countries in Europe and also to Ireland and to places in the United Kingdom, to countries in the United Kingdom. And it was really fantastic to see how in a lot of the schools I would visit, especially elementary or primary schools, I would see the posters of the SDGs on the walls of the school. And that taught me something about how that kind of symbolism, the colors, the icons can be ways to teach students already at a young age about the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that's a key part of, again, advancing global citizenship education. And third, mainstreaming global citizenship education means that we need to also increase international exchange. This panel is an example of that. We have, I see in the audience, folks coming in from Sri Lanka, Rwanda, Philippines, from India, Kenya. Our panel members are representing the United States and Canada, North America. So what a powerful way of just even in this little 90 minutes of time we have to be able to engage in kind of this type of international exchange. The pandemic has been very difficult on the global community, especially on schools and teachers. One opportunity, though, that has emerged is that more and more people are becoming familiar with ways to engage in international exchange and virtual exchange through tools like we're using AirMeet or through Zoom. Of course, there's always the question of accessibility to this technology, and that's a very important concern as it relates to equity. However, I think that technology and the opportunities for virtual exchange is a key part of mainstreaming and advancing global citizenship education. So in my own research, in my own work as an associate professor, I have been able to engage my teacher candidates in collaborative online international learning opportunities, or called COIL, and also now a newer term that's being used is the GNL, or globally networked learning opportunities, which is a collaborative approach like COIL for research and teaching and for bringing students, teachers, professors across the world together in this globally networked learning. So those are my 3 points I wanted to open with in regards to how to advance and mainstream global citizenship education. And again, thank you so much for this time.
Thank you so much, Eric. I yield the floor to Linoon.
Okay, good morning, Irene. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this educational leadership forum on mainstreaming education, global citizenship education. And I also want to thank our audience globally attending, spending time with us today. And it's great to see Dr. Sherman and Dr. Biker as well. And thank you so much. And today I want to follow up with Dr. Biker's opening to focus on the importance of integrating global citizenship education into teacher education. The reason for this focus is because global citizenship education has been a mandatory course in the teacher education program at our university, at the UPI. So with the support from the Canadian government and also UNICEF Canada, I developed the first teacher education courses to systematically introduce the rationale, theories, framework, topics, curriculum, instruction, and assessment aspects of educating for global citizenship for teachers at K to 20 levels. So I've been offering the courses to pre-service and in-service educators in Canada and all over the world for the past 10 years. So at the beginning of of each course, each term, I usually ask the teacher learners to complete a pre-course assessment on their capacity of implementing global citizenship education. At the end of the course, I ask them to do the same assessment again, and also ask them to write a learning reflection about their journey from this course. So I want to share several points I learned from the teacher learners I have taught over the past 10 years. So usually teachers often consider themselves as global citizens, at least that's the case in my context, and they desire to educate for global citizenship. And most teachers have practiced global citizenship education, but they do not have the discourse and the knowledge to validate or explain these experiences. So they often do not have a systematic understanding of global citizenship education as a framework. So most teachers felt more confident and inspired to implement global citizenship education after completing the course. So one fundamental reason why it is so important, because teachers are the pathways to ensuring all students to receive the knowledge, skills, attributes of sustainable development and global citizenship. But other than this, their experiences with global citizenship education also indicate several other reasons. The first one is a cognitive domain of global awareness, global knowledge, critical literacy, and critical thinking allow them to make the educational process a more relevant, engaging, and meaningful for their students. The second reason is that the social emotional learning domain in global citizenship education, particularly in fostering the empathy, solidarity, and peace, help teachers build an inclusive learning environment. So help them manage the classrooms with diverse student population, and also help them connect with students from different backgrounds. This enhances the equity and inclusion in the educational environment and practices. The third reason is also the behavioral domain of global citizenship education enables teachers' lifelong learning habits, empower them to make positive changes in their student lives on a daily basis. It's a more sustainable approach. Last but not the least, that global citizenship education aims for common good and collective well-being for all. So this awareness and commitment aligns very well with most teachers' motivation. So it brings a deeper meaning to their job and also results in the increased job satisfaction and motivation. So that's, I would like to share with our audience today the several points. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights, Lin-Won. I yield the floor to Paul to make his initial remarks.
Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Perhaps even the evening. It's so great to have this ability to do a presentation over the airs this way. It's really a pleasure to be a part of this wonderful panel, and I would like to thank the Global Citizenship Foundation for their kind invitation. Today, I will give some remarks concerning how incorporating global citizenship teaching and learning into education curricula provides students with essential knowledge and skills to successfully navigate their lives in an increasingly interconnected world. My research and teaching on global citizenship explores the efforts of higher education institutions to promote a global citizenship ethic that leads to students identifying and actively engaging as global citizens. Post-secondary education, where I teach, has a responsibility to help students develop a global citizenship ethic by promoting global awareness and cultivating a critical understanding of one's place in an increasingly globalized society. Equally important to students' perspective taking and identity development as global citizens, however, is the provision of opportunities to participate in global citizenship activities that can serve to develop a sense of responsibility as someone who contributes to making the world a better place to live. GCED should inspire students to continually seek the meaning of global citizenship in their daily lives through both critical reflection and active engagement as global citizens. The world needs young people in increasing numbers to engage as global citizens who can take ownership, responsibility, and action for greater global social justice and well-being. Bourke, Bamber, and Lyons provide a helpful distinction for conceptualizing GCED by contrasting education about global citizenship with education for global citizenship. Education about global citizenship typically entails practices that provide students with an understanding of relevant and contemporary global issues, as well as the customs and traditions of multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-faith populations. It is an important initial approach for teaching global awareness, as it gives students a platform for identifying and connecting with unknown others around the world. According to certain theorists, students who are equipped with this type of knowledge are more likely to adopt a global citizenship perspective, which often leads to or enhances their endorsement of pro-social attitudes such as empathy, diversity, and social and environmental justice. It is not clear, however, if simply identifying as a global citizen or endorsing global citizenship beliefs leads to active global citizenship engagement. The second broad approach to GCED, classified as education for global citizenship, goes beyond knowledge transfer and involves the integration of applicable skills, values, and attitudes that are germane to encouraging active global citizenship engagement. In this approach, students are provided with opportunities for experiential learning, such as volunteering locally and internationally, studying abroad, and developing initiatives that help them to connect local and global issues. My own empirical research in this area suggests, for example, that after participating in short-term study abroad, post-secondary students significantly strengthen their views of global citizenship, their endorsement of pro-social values, and their inclination to participate in global citizenship activities. Educational practices that teach about global citizenship are invaluable, but in isolation may limit the capacity of the student to sufficiently engage as a global citizen. To accomplish this outcome, educational curricula needs to integrate knowledge about global citizenship with learning opportunities that help motivate the student to participate as a global citizen. Integrating education about global citizenship with education for global citizenship is the most comprehensive and holistic approach for cultivating both a global citizenship identity and a desire to take proactive action on behalf of global society. So to conclude, through my research and teaching, I have found that the praxis from understanding global citizenship to doing global citizenship can be quite challenging for students. It is not uncommon for them to struggle in defining their roles or contributions as global citizens, as expressed, for example, by this student in one of my studies, who quite honestly remarked, quote, "I don't think I'm a full global citizen because even though I have had the opportunity to think about global citizenship a lot, I still can't figure out what I should do right now," unquote. While active participation as a global citizen is often seen as a challenging task by young persons, my research suggests that intentional curricular programming of global citizenship content is a critical component for motivating students to seek global citizenship in their own lives. Once inspired to seek the meaning of global citizenship as a personal aspiration, it is not a stretch for young persons to feel a sense of responsibility for their interconnected planet and take whatever action they are able to protect and sustain it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your insights, Paul. Now we move into a round where our panelists would ask one question to another. So I request Lin Won to ask one question to any other panelists. And you can nominate another person. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Erin. My question is to both, actually, Dr. Sherman and Dr. Biker. So before pandemic, we're very concerned about, because global citizenship involve global international understanding and global exchanges. You know, you have traveled extensively, and on the other side, that kind of traveling have concerns about that some students, people who cannot afford, right? It's a social justice issue. The shift to virtual exchange, like today, during the pandemic, I personally feel it's opens some kind of opportunities and different ways of viewing international exchange. So, what kind of opportunities do you see for post-pandemic era for global citizenship education based on our experience with both physical and virtual global exchanges? Dr. Biker, you could go first.
Sure. That is a really great question, and I've been sitting on that question, thinking about it for quite some time, especially in this current semester as I'm leading a COIL project with students in the United States and Kazakhstan, and then a globally networked learning project, which is has a little bit more of a research component with students in the United States and Germany. So I've been able to engage in two different projects in this, or I am engaging in two different projects in this current semester, both under this notion of international virtual exchange. And before the pandemic, I was leading study abroad programs to the UK, to South Africa, India. I had one planned, and so that shift or the pivot, like we used to, right? That was a big buzzword during the pandemic. We always had to pivot. I do think one of the opportunities with the virtual exchange is that there's a more inclusive opportunity, right? For more students to be able to participate. In particular for me, for teacher candidates, like for our in teacher education, for students who may not have participated in study abroad, or cost perhaps might have been an issue, that this kind of virtual exchange provides now a more inclusive, hopefully equitable, getting closer to if digital access is always an issue, Wi-Fi, bandwidth, those sort of issues. But I also think that the virtual exchange has been more of an equitable kind of approach. On the other side, one of the challenges is that when you're doing virtual exchange, then the time, of course, is just sort of maybe an hour-long time or 90 minutes of time. And it's sort of, I'm tuned in to the camera at this time, and there's some intercultural communication happening, but it doesn't quite replace being on a study abroad type of program, right? But what I think it is promising is that it does afford opportunities that we might not, at least in my teacher education program, we might not have even thought about before. We were just too easy. It was too quick to say, let's just set up a study abroad program, take students to South Africa for 4 or 5 weeks, but it's only a limited number of students, maybe a dozen students. Whereas in this current semester, I have almost 100 of my teacher candidates participating in these virtual exchanges. And that's been real promising. That's been a great opportunity, because even just a little bit of that kind of international experience and developing intercultural communication, developing global competencies like investigating the world, recognizing perspectives, communicating ideas, the taking action piece from the Asia Society. We haven't really thought about what that is going to look like, but I think it's a start. right? And there's a lot to be said for that.
Thank
Good
you. Dr. Sherman, your
Uh,
experiences?
all right. So, Dr. Sherman, yes, would you like to ask a question or would you like to respond?
Well, I'll ask a question, but I just want to, because Lin Wang was kind enough to ask that. Just on that question, I'm a little negative about the virtual Zoom experience. I mean, we've all experienced Zoom fatigue by now, I think, in terms of meetings and things like that. But in terms of intercultural exchange, I too have led many study abroads, and there's just nothing like being in the environment to learn about the culture. And so, while there may be some room for virtual exchange for global citizenship education, I would hope that we can return quickly to the live experience. We've canceled our study abroads at our university for 3 years in a row now, which is really unfortunate, but hopefully we'll get back to it next year. So my question is, I'll ask my fellow Canadian this question, and that is that in my mind, global citizenship means to have hope, despite or in spite of all the political and economic and social and environmental challenges that we've been facing over the past, I don't know, too long to remember. How do you instill hope in your students to want to engage as global citizens?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sherman. That's a great question. Actually, that's a most important aspect of educating, global citizenship education, I would say. I mean, understanding the global issue, that's a starting point, but inspire people to take action based on the hope for peace, global peace, or never has global peace, but the hope for peace, prosperity for all, and well-being. Actually, it's the greatest motivation for both teachers and learners, in my case, in my observation, to feel that we are doing something through education for something good. That's the biggest aspiration for teachers, at least, and for myself as well. So every day I feel my work is meaningful. That's part of the hope. And the second part is that a global citizenship education is really focusing on action. Without action, it doesn't matter how much knowledge, how competent you are, you're not a global citizen in that sense. So focusing on taking action, especially for young people, let's say 7 years old, 10 years old, and starting with yourself, with your family, I think the gradual positive changes in individual lives and the local communities, that also gives people hope and aspiration to be a global citizen. So it is highly relevant. At least that's my experiences. Instead of using global issues, the doomy, topics to make them feel depressed, I think the reason the more important for teacher educator for us is that to inspire them, to take daily actions. It could be in the classroom, could be in the family, could be in the local community, and focusing on yourself when you can, focusing on your small circle or local context when you can. But gradually, when you become have the formal leadership at that time, our hope is that when they grow up and they will be more powerful, have the discourse and awareness to take more powerful decisions or make informed decisions. So I feel not to know those and not to take action sometimes it is the biggest mistake.
Thank you so much for your thoughts, Linwon. I would request Dr. Sherman, if you can please ask one question to either of the panelists. Since we are running short of time, I would request the panelists to help me in completing
Well, I
this
think
a
it's
little.
Dr. Biker's turn. I already asked the question. I think it's Dr. Biker's turn.
All right. All right.
I
Dr.
did
Baik.
have two questions prepared, but I really would love to ask this question to Lin Wan. Thank you both. Really appreciated your remarks, and this questioning time has been quite engaging. Lin Wan, I was quite curious when you were talking about how you described the development of the GCED, Global Citizenship Education in teacher education, and the connections you had with UNESCO. And I just would love to hear from you about possibilities that we have to partner with international organizations like UNESCO in the development of curriculum, but also in implementation of that, and the importance of that too.
Thank you, Dr. Baker, and that's a great question. Actually, I was kind of in the fortunate situation when I started my faculty position at UPI. Actually, I immediately served as a curriculum expert, because that's my background, to work with UNICEF. At that time, UNESCO was not coordinating agency, and UNICEF was kind of involved in global classrooms. So I started from there. Have already spent 2 years actually developing a teacher education course and resource package. So it was involved because that's a Canadian situation. That doesn't explain the US situation or the other countries. It's kind of a fortunate situation. But since I think 2015, since UNESCO Sustainable Development Goals and UNESCO later on take over that coordinating agencies role, they are focusing on developing more resources. I already have my own resources. So that's allowed me to incorporate like SDGs, which is a more inclusive way to connect, make it more meaningful. And how do we approach them? I think, I have been very active with in the Canadian side with the UNESCO. I was the educational commissioner for 4 years actually to promote global citizenship, and it depends on each country. I'm not sure in the US there's a commission, the American Commission, and the American context is not very much focused. You treat yourself as global. Do some sense, and it's not a disrespect. It's just the contextual difference. In Canada, all the law, the Charter of Human Rights, all the regulations are more aligned with the international. So I feel for myself, I was kind of in the fortunate situation. I worked very closely with UNESCO, work closely with UNICEF. I would like to next step if we can work together and to work with the UNESCO here, because they are focusing on developing resources. I have my textbook, I was going to publish actually later this year or early next year with a textbook for teacher education and resource. So hopefully we can make more contribution by sharing. It can only be more powerful by sharing.
That was beautiful and powerful, Lin Wan. I have one question to all of you. Since you were talking about curriculum, right? What are the dangers of having a curriculum for global citizenship education, given that global citizenship education promises to be transformative? It promises to be more experiential. So what are the dangers of bringing in a curriculum in this context?
I will start with your question. When you say curriculum, it depends on what levels. And if you're talking about teacher education, higher education level, or you're talking about K to 12 level, or even K to 20 level. I think for teacher education context, having the global citizenship education curriculum situated one course, at least, the teachers can only have, let's say in our case, no more than 10 courses, something like that, right? So they're very limited curriculum space. So it allows me to provide a very systematic view on global citizenship in a very short, in one term, or 12 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. That's manageable. But my teachers coming from all backgrounds, all levels, from K to 12 level and different subject area. But at K to 20 level, no, it's not the best way to go. You cannot rely on one course, on either called global citizenship education or global issue. That doesn't work that way. So all teachers need to find one way or another to integrate the goals, not the concept, but at least the ultimate goal, the dimensions, the domains, into their subject area of teaching. So I think if teachers, even the curriculum doesn't specifically use the term global citizenship, actually lots of curriculum do cover the objectives, global citizenship education. So it's important for all teachers to do that way because it makes them more motivated. It does help them to create a more environment which is more inclusive to student needs and backgrounds. That's my experience.
Thank you so much. Yes,
from my perspective, I think the major danger, and I've experienced this myself where I work, is some of the negative stereotyping about global citizenship and the mythology. I think everybody on the panel, and I'm sure many of the audience members understands what some of these myths are. In fact, when I teach students about global citizenship, that's one of the first things I expose them to is some of the mythology. But the danger lies in if there are in the university or in whatever the educational environment you're in, if there isn't the buy-in from administrators right through to the teachers of a global citizenship perspective, then that's going to be very challenging for students because studies do show that one's normative environment is a very important influential factor when identifying as a global citizen. So if there are some teachers that identify as global citizens, but others are very negative about it, that's going to be very confusing for the student, as well as what's happening at home, what the parents and the rest of the family members think about global citizenship. So this is why in whatever educational institution we're introducing a global citizenship curriculum and also extracurricular activities, there has to be, in the landscape, there has to be a more holistic approach right across the institution of an understanding of the promise of global citizenship so that students are not confused as to whether or not they should approach their lives in that way and take action for global citizenship.
It's a very smart question. Something as what Paul just said, here in the United States, after the fascist Trump administration, let's just be honest, right, where we're trending more towards authoritarianism to fascism, really, there is, everything seems to be dangerous. And education itself seems to be coming under fire unless it's, something that's replicating right-wing conservatism. So global education is right in that. And it's sad because, like Paul mentioned, there's a mythology about whether global education or being a global citizen means that I'm giving up my national identity. So there's this pitting, right, of internationalism versus nationalism. And in the United States, the way that kind of plays out, whether it's in universities or in elementary schools, middle schools, it becomes a political issue very quickly, rather than something that is seen as there's opportunity for understanding your what it means to be a citizen in the United States also means that you're part of a global community. In fact, there's a very important role that we have. So I have a big concern about that. And it feels like a lot of the work that we do as professors in in higher education is to dispel those myths, and also to say, look, there is an important responsibility that we have to be able to prepare our students for not just what does it mean to be a citizen of the United States, but also a citizen of the world. So what Lin-Yan, you mentioned earlier in your comments about just this, there in Canada, I think there's more reception, more of a receptive kind of understanding of that and connection to international organizations. I hope the tide turns for the United States. I truly do.
May I jump in, Aaron?
Sure.
Yeah. So Dr. Biker, actually, I am right now, I'm teaching a global leadership program, a doctoral program in the US. And all the students are from, I have similar concern, how much can I introduce? Actually, I'm just a few weeks ago, I introduced the UN roadmap for research for the post-pandemic recovery for the doctoral students. They're also organizational. I think, the real danger is to implement global citizenship education without understanding what it is really about. So in a superficial understanding about that's a real danger. To promote as the ideology, that's a danger. I think, really the goal of global citizenship education is more to promote peace. Who doesn't want peace? Prosperity. Who doesn't want prosperity? Well-being. We need well-being, right? So yes, I think it's important to connect the personal, organizational, and professional in a more skillful way. So really, it's allow the audience, whatever the audience are, leaders or students, to really understand. So it's a long journey, I would say, to go up here, because our global environment doesn't really go this way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So one of the concerns that we see when it comes to, say, global citizenship education is it's often people accuse it as being something very Western in its ideas, and it's trying to advance the Western agenda uh, across countries around the world. So how do we go ahead? I mean, say, how do we contextualize global citizenship education in a way that it balances or addresses or is in harmony with local contexts? So are there any three ideas that you can share that policymakers, teacher institutions take into consideration when they're actually talking about global citizenship and advancing global citizenship? Uh, Paul, would you like to take this?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really great question, and I actually cover that with my students. That is one of the mythologies, and the way that I counter that is I introduce my students to the concept of cosmopolitanism, which global citizenship has its roots in, which is, a caring about the entire world, about the equal human worth of the equal worth of all humans. And once they can wrap their heads around that, then it's not seen as a Western or a capitalist notion or anything of that nature, but it is more of an understanding and appreciation of the other. And one of the people that I quote quite a bit when I introduce the students to modern conceptualizations of global citizenship is Daisaku Ikeda. I'm not sure if anybody on the panel or our viewers are aware of Ikeda, but he gave a speech over 20 years ago at Columbia University to the Faculty of Education on global citizenship. And I just want to introduce three aspects of global citizenship that he talked about that sort of moves away from any kind of Western notion of global citizenship. And in fact, he's Japanese. So he talked about the three essential qualities of a global citizen: the wisdom to perceive the interconnectedness of all life and living things, the courage not to fear or deny difference, but to respect and strive to understand people of different cultures and to grow from encounters with them. And thirdly, the compassion to maintain an imaginative empathy that reaches beyond one's immediate surroundings and extends to those suffering in distant places. There's nothing Western about that. That's a humanistic approach to how we should be treating our fellow human beings. And I think the more we can help students and teachers be aware that this is truly what global citizenship is about, then we can move away from any kind of ideologies about global citizenship.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul, for your insights. Linwon, you were talking about fostering critical reflexivity through critical global citizenship education. So if you can just shed a light on how this would mainstream and advance global citizenship.
Just one. Our focus on curriculum. So teachers are very important, and that's mainstream in schools, which means we need to prepare teachers first, whether the policies and curriculum are in place or not. And I think teacher education as a small group, it's a good start. And to make the curriculum relevant to teachers' daily life, including planning, their appreciation of the curriculum outcomes, or their student population or context where they are teaching. So make it relevant to them. And for teachers, is that reflexivity means teachers need to reflect all the time, need to take the time, and this in return to help them to more make the curriculum and the pedagogy and also activities more relevant to more students. That's there are many other strategies. So
Thank you so much. I think that gives a sense as to how important reflection is within the framework of advancing global citizenship education within and beyond the classrooms. Another question to Paul. You talk about global citizenship as personal aspiration. So, how important is that, in your opinion, to advancing global citizenship within the classrooms?
Well, I think it's everything because we all know that there's no legal status to global citizenship. And that if for one to identify as a global citizen and hopefully take action, they first of all have to be inspired to do so, and that's our role as educators and as parents. But once inspired, then it has to be integrated as a personal aspiration. One has to take a stand, and despite the doom and gloom, as Luann said earlier, that's going on around us and will continue to go around us, to have hope that we can change the world, even if it's just one person. And so that's where personal aspiration comes in. We all know global citizenship is a perspective, it's an orientation, it's an attitude, and that nobody can make you be a global citizen. But I certainly agree with the comments made earlier that, and Nigel Dower actually said this or questioned this: can one truly consider themselves a global citizen if they don't take action as a global citizen? Anyway, those are my comments. Thanks for the question.
So much, Paul. So when we talk about global citizenship education, a lot of authors, a lot of philosophers, a lot of thinkers in this domain there's no one agreement there's no agreement to a common definition of what exactly global citizenship could mean. So in this context, where we do not have a definition for global citizenship that is commonly agreed, uh, how exactly can educators and policymakers navigate through this idea of global citizenship that is agreeable to everybody within this context? Eric, would you like to take the question?
That's a great question. I think it actually kind of, I'll start by just sharing or remarking on what Paul talked about in the I forget the name of the scholar you mentioned from Japan, but that notion of a more humanistic kind of global citizenship education that is inclusive of everyone and also languages. And Paul, that definition, I thought I want to follow up with you because I need to get that quote. That's a very powerful one. And I think they're in thinking about, right, what is global citizenship education and even defining it, there needs to be the inclusion of something that isn't just in English only, something that is inclusive of cultural understandings, right? And I don't know exactly how that's communicated, but I think that's important. It connects to that question you had earlier about how to make sure that global citizenship education isn't just seen as sort of a neoliberal, right, kind of impulse of advancing sort of this internationalism in service to capitalism, right? Which that's often kind of how it's perceived, or that's one of the criticisms. So I wrote a chapter with some colleagues. We were thinking about notions of global citizenship and global equity, both from the global north and global south, and looking at, a term like Ubuntu as a word to be able to convey global citizenship. I am because we are, and it's Ubuntu is sort of a word that comes from region of South Africa, the South African region, from some of the language groups there, and maybe Amartya Sen, his notion of what is justice. I hope I'm saying this correct. Nyaya. I think that's the Hindi word for it. Aaron, you might be able to help me with that. Nyaya. How would you say that? Nyaya?
Nyaya. Nyaya.
Yeah.
You're right.
I think the inclusion of language is really important in being able to convey a more inclusive global citizenship education definition. And that would be something in thinking how I'd answer that question. I just think that language needs to be a big part of that.
Thank you so much, Eric. I have one audience question here. How do we build confidence in conducting GCED amongst teachers? Lignon, would you like to take this question?
By start doing something today. So I guess that if the question is from a teacher and perspective, it, as I said, it's a lifelong learning process, including all of us, myself, right? I've been doing this every day. I feel I need to learn something new. How to use this technology, how to use this pedagogy, and what's the consideration for curriculum. So it is a lifelong learning, but start by understanding, do some quick reading, understanding what it's about, and start doing it in the classroom by baby steps. That's if you keep doing that on a regular basis, I think the capacity will be built over the time. And one suggestion I gave to my students, also teachers, is that if you check the United Nations, there are almost several international day per month. Starting from there, and like yesterday was Rotary International. It's called World Peace and Understanding Day. So I would just introduce that World Peace and Understanding Day, what it's about, and how important peace and global understanding to our life. So yeah, doing that regularly to students. That's one way to develop that capacity.
All right. Thank you, Linon. Eric and Paul, would you like to add something to this?
Oh, sorry, Eric, did you want to go?
Go ahead, and I'll follow.
I'll add, and I actually put in the chat a reference for Daisaku Ikeda's speech on global citizenship, so anyone who's interested could look that up. I'll tell you personally, I belong to a international peace organization called Sokogakai International, and within that organization, it started in Japan and it's worldwide now in 190 territories and countries. And its aim is world peace through education and culture. And within that organization, there's an expression in Japanese, it's ningen kakume, and in English, it translates roughly into human revolution. And that's basically what we're talking about with global citizenship. It's a step-by-step gradual process that as long as we do something today where we feel confident and encouraged that it's going to lead to change, then that's really the best way to approach. Otherwise, we feel defeated and pessimistic. And so human revolution is very much a part of global citizenship, to do something today that is positive, more so than we did yesterday, and not as much as tomorrow. And that's always leading. That's how we climb the mountain towards greater social justice and human rights and all that stuff that's going to make the world better, hopefully.
Thank you so much, Paul. Eric?
Yes. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't, and I think Paul's comment helps to lead into both comments related to make a small step today, right? Take a little action today, and I think that's really important. One of the things in my own work with teacher educators and undergraduate students is just introducing the Sustainable Development Goals. A lot of students in the United States don't even know what SDGs are the first time they hear it. Maybe it might be their junior year of undergraduate at university. So the two, hope it's okay to talk about the two manuscripts in the Ed magazine. And I wrote these with two students. One is a doctoral student, Caitlin Holhauser. Keep your eye on her name. Both students are brilliant. You'll be hearing from them, Mahita Sadula and Caitlin Holhauser. And for both of them, in the manuscripts we wrote, we really thought about, right, what is even just understanding the development goals? What does that mean? How could you do a little bit of even comparative research around the Sustainable Development Goal, whether that's maybe SDG 4, what does that look like in the context of the United States compared to India or to another country of the world? Making those small little even comparative inroads through research is a way to advance global citizenship education, just through the knowledge production. So I think that's a real opportunity. And at the elementary or primary level, like what Caitlin Holhauser investigates in our manuscript, even just introducing, and I mentioned this earlier in my comments, what the icon, the sort of symbolism and the icons within the SDGs, introducing that to children at a young age can be a way to talk about environmental sustainability, the importance of environmental sustainability, and why they want to take action. I think that's important too, right? Why take action? And the SDGs kind of provide a roadmap, as I said earlier, to be able to understand why.
Thank you so much for sharing that one, Eric. Coming to SDGs, when we look at Target 4.7 and we look at the indicator, now for any country to achieve this target of advancing global citizenship education, there are four core parameters that measure whether a country has achieved this particular target. So when you look at teacher education, to the extent to which it has embedded global citizenship education in teacher education, in, say, national education policy, in the curricula, as well as assessments. So these are four components on which you measure a country's progress you measure a country's progress in the context of advancing global citizenship education. Now, my concern here is assessments is an integral part of advancing global citizenship education to know where we stand. So one of the challenges that a lot of educators end up sharing with us is how do we actually go ahead with assessments? Because a lot of assessments that they have focus on cognitive domain of learning, whereas the non-cognitive is a little harder for a lot of educators to go ahead. So how do you see this particular component of assessments in the context of global citizenship education? So how do we move forward with that?
I'll just chime in on that. Well, developing a metric for, I guess, developing a metric for assessing change is probably a good idea. I'm not clear why it hasn't been done yet, other than the fact that it probably is difficult to do because we don't have a common definition of global citizenship, although there are common characteristics to the various definitions. And so wrapping our minds around how do we assess outcomes around global citizenship is a tough one. I mean, I'm not even sure it's important, and I swallow hard when I say that because I'm very much along the lines of assessing outcomes. I'm just more interested in the doing part. As long as someone is taking action and feeling that they're contributing, I think that's important. There are surveys out there, and I use one quite a bit, developed by Stephen Rice and Iva Kozarska-Miller, the Global Citizen Survey. They're from Texas A&M Commerce, which basically is a survey that where people you can tell if what are the influences of one's global citizenship identity, how strong their identity is, how likely they are to endorse global citizenship values. Developing a metric for measuring the impact of global citizenship action, that would be a big challenge, and maybe it's something that Eric, your students might want to look into doing.
Lin Won, would you like to add a few thoughts?
I think the difficulty with assessment a lot of that is come from a misunderstanding about assessment. Traditionally, in many countries, especially when the educational investment is at the minimum level, assessment is for choosing, because you choose a certain number of students to go into a school or education. If that's the case in the country, that's normally the purpose of assessment, is to choose a small group of students. You never aim for all students, okay? That's a genuine difficulty. If the understanding of assessment is not only for choosing part of the student, but also for learning purposes, to improve learning, to better education. And then global citizenship doesn't focusing on assessment, especially the summative assessment, using exam, test, quizzes, and it's focusing on formative assessment, which means classroom observation to see your students are more engaged, they are developing skills, and that's on daily basis. You cannot put that on paper. So that is, teachers are seeing assessment, using assessment, but not necessarily through that summative assessment at the midterm examination or that. I think there are two ways of dealing with this issue. Is that for teachers, I think it's important to understand the purpose of assessment, have a more thorough understanding of that. And for policymakers, they have to understand assessment is a guidance stick for teachers' behaviors. So they do need to open up and to figure out a way to provide alternative or suggestions. But sometimes at the national level, the policy does indicate that, but the teacher implementation level, it's involved a new circle of training or development on assessment and curriculum.
Thank you so much, Lin-Won. Eric, would you like to add something?
I'll just echo Lin-Yan. She said it perfect. I think that is, I don't have much to add. I think how you phrased it is correct in terms of thinking about the true purpose of assessment. So I could not have said it any better.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric. I think Kuom has added a few questions from the audience. Assuming that global citizenship skills can be taught, again, this goes into assessments. How can we practically assess them formatively? So I think we have already taken this up. We first of all need to understand what is the purpose of our assessment and then move forward. Right. So we'll take another question. How can we possibly embed global citizenship knowledge and skills into daily classroom input? So if you have any practical tips, I would be happy to hear them out. So Paul, would you like to take this up and then others can chime in?
Sure. Could you just repeat the question again?
So how can we possibly embed global citizenship knowledge and skills into daily classroom input?
Well, I'll just refer back to some of the comments I made during my opening, which is the importance of making a distinction between education for and about global citizenship. And I think at the early ages, it's important for students to be exposed to various cultures, to understand some of the key global issues that are going on around the world without scaring them, because it can be quite scary, and to use their strengths and to use the curriculum for them to start thinking outside of their own affiliations. Martha Nussbaum talks about this ring of affiliations from the inner to the family, the extended family, to community, and the largest ring, if you think of concentric circles, is to humanity. And so at some point, helping students to understand that our allegiance we can have multiple allegiances. I think Eric mentioned about this tension between being a global citizen and a national citizen. There doesn't have to be that tension. We can honor our affiliations with various communities, our own families, our country, and to humanity, which is the tough one because there is a tension there. So I think we have to understand the age that we're introducing these concepts, cognitive abilities, and by the time we get to the post-secondary part of things, maybe even high school, then start introducing this aspect of education for global citizenship, which is taking action, doing something to make the world a better place. So that's how I would. If I was in charge of the world's education curriculum, that's how I would do it. Start small, with an understanding about global issues and different peoples around the world, and then moving into exposure to these environments.
Thank you so much, Paul. So we come towards the end of the panel discussion, but before that, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask our panelists a practical tip on how educators can stop. Like, what is the one thing that you want educators to rethink, or to start, or to continue in their journey of advancing global citizenship education? So any one of you can go ahead first. So if there's one thing each that they can start, rethink, and continue, what would that be?
I will start. One suggestion I would like to give for teachers is to focusing on creating an open and safe environment for students to engage in experiential learning and discussions, and try to suppress your teacher's own urge to say this is right, this is wrong. The purpose of doing that is for students to raise questions, to share their perspectives, to connect the content to their own lives. So if there's controversial conflicts, let students figure out how to save that. As long as the environment is safe, they feel safe to ask any questions, I think eventually students will be able to develop the kind of capacity to be a critical thinker and a problem solver.
Thank you. Paul, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think along those same lines, there's two things that I can suggest. One is that we have moved away over the past few decades from character development, education for the purpose of character development. And I'll just give an example of empathy skills or attitude. We don't teach these things anymore. We're too focused on education for a career. And so I would, as a teacher, I would stop and think, how can I help my students develop empathy and compassion for others? That's an important skill. Even if you don't identify as a global citizen, it's an important skill as a human being. So if we can introduce exercises and share discussion around how to be kinder to people and move away from some of this divisiveness that's been creeping up on us over the past number of years, I think that would be important.
Thank you so much, Paul. Eric?
Yes, great question. I have a lot to say, but I'll keep it short. I would say start with representation, right? As a teacher, I remember teacher in Washington, D.C., that's where I got my start as a classroom teacher, 5th grade, and very diverse student groups, lots of new Americans from all across, coming from all around the world. And even just starting with what are the flags of the countries that their families came from, what are that kind of representation of language, culture, but also countries that are connected to the world. It goes a long way in having students can see how they are part of our classroom, part of the classroom, but also their what's important to them is represented. So that's one. Rethink. I think we need to rethink the role of social studies in schools. And I'm speaking specifically to social studies in the United States context, which is very marginalized and often consigned to the last 10 minutes of a Friday and maybe pulling out a newspaper or something like that. There needs to be more emphasis on social studies as a gateway to global education. And it should be integrated rather than just, isolated. And then finally, I believe, again, and that's what I open with, is just the inclusion of, to include the Sustainable Development Goals, and to actually use the icon symbolism and the color of the Sustainable Development Goals, which I think communicates more than what I could do in words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. So this is the moment for us to shape intentional and inclusive policies and nurturing practices towards creating an ecosystem that is empathetic, compassionate, mindful, and fosters a space for all educators and students to grow and thrive and be the global citizens that they're all destined to be. Educators and school leaders, I believe, truly have the power and potential to affect this positive transformation. I do understand that we still have a lot of questions that we may not have been able to cover or answer them sufficiently through this panel discussion. So I look forward to hearing from you your thoughts, ideas, suggestions towards advancing global citizenship education. Please send me an email or tag us in your post on social media, and I would be delighted to know more from you. Also, do suggest what you'd like our future discussions to be on. And now we move towards the launch of the Dotted magazine. It has been a pleasure and privilege to have Dr. Paul Sherman, Dr. Eric Baker, and Dr. Linwan Go Brennan, and all the other amazing contributors from around the world. In fact, it's a pleasure for us to have the three authors here with us. So virtually, if we can launch the magazine with a video. So I'm assuming and I'm visualizing that each one of you, you're contributing to the launch by cutting a ribbon virtually. All right, so here we go. Thank you, everybody, and congratulations to everybody on the launch. I'm just sharing the link with all the audiences here, so you can have a look at the magazine, be the first to view the third edition of the Dotted magazine. So quickly, if we can have a few thoughts and words from our awesome authors. Linwan, if you can lead the way.
Okay, I just want to end this presentation by thank you, Aaron. You're doing an excellent job, and your ability of organizing through the virtual ways and also bring our audience educator from globally. This is a very powerful. You're doing excellent. Keep the good work, and I would love to collaborate with you for the other things in the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul.
I'll just echo those sentiments. You guys are doing fantastic work. I had never heard of you, I have to admit, quite honestly, before you extended the invite to contribute to your magazine and to speak on the panel. I wish I had. I'm certainly going to introduce you to my students and to anybody else who's interested in global citizenship. And I think you're doing a fantastic job. And the fact that you're making you're making this available internationally through the use of a virtual environment is wonderful. I look forward, though, at some point to perhaps engaging in person. That would be a tremendous accomplishment too. So thanks again to you and your foundation.
Thank you, Dr. Paul Sherman. Eric?
Yes, thank you, and congratulations to the Global Citizenship Foundation with the successful launch of this third issue of .ed magazine. It's a privilege to be part of that, and Arian, thank you for arranging this panel discussion. It's been really wonderful to be part of as well, and with such esteemed colleagues to be engaged with in this time. So thank you all, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you once again, and I really appreciate that you took out some time from your busy schedule. I know it's a lot difficult when we have to collaborate globally when it comes to time schedule and all of those things. So thank you for taking the time out. I am deeply indebted to each one of you, and to our amazing audience. Thank you for your support and love throughout our journey with the Online Educational Leadership Forum. So thank you, and I do hope you enjoy the magazine. Take care, bye-bye, and see you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.